Brynn could make the walk-in under 10 minutes if she didn't stop, and she almost never did. Every morning she went the same way, down the front steps, left on the sidewalk, past the hardware store that wouldn't open until 9, across the intersection where the light was always green at that hour because nobody else was driving, then around the back of the building to the kitchen entrance. The key fit a deadbolt that stuck when it was cold. She had learned to lift the door slightly with one hand while she turned the key with the other. She no longer thought about it. Her hands just did it. The walk went back to high school. It began on summer mornings. Petra needed an extra pair of hands, and Brynn was there. She came back the following summer and the one after that. During the school year, she helped on weekends and some afternoons. After she graduated, the hours kept adding up. She started arriving earlier. She stayed later. At some point, the schedule stopped being something anyone discussed and became simply what it was. 8 years later, the title hadn't changed. Brynn was the baker. Petra, her mother, was the owner. But most of the daily production had been in Brynn's hands for a long time. Most mornings she was the first one in the kitchen. She turned on the ovens before the lights because the ovens needed more time. She checked the supplies: flour, sugar, baking powder, buttermilk. She could see when something was low without measuring. If the flour bin was less than a third full, she had to open a new bag before the second round of donuts. If the buttermilk was down to 1 container, she wrote it on the order list. Then she started the first batch. Buttermilk cake donuts came first every morning. She put the dry ingredients in the mixer bowl, added the buttermilk, eggs, and melted butter, and ran the paddle just until the batter came together. She didn't time the mixing. She watched how the batter moved under the paddle and how it settled when she scraped the bowl down. Sometimes she could tell from the sound alone, a heaviness in the way the paddle dragged through the bowl. When it was right, it was thick but still easy to pipe into the pans. When it wasn't too loose or too stiff, she could usually tell before she filled the first pan. These were not things anyone had taught her in a single lesson. They had accumulated over years of standing at the same table, the way flour accumulated in the seams of her work shoes no matter how carefully she wiped them down. Everything she knew about baking had come from this kitchen. She piped the batter into greased donut pans and slid the first trays into the ovens. She started on the muffins next. Blueberry. Every day. After that, the coffee cake, cinnamon streusel, baked in sheet pans and cut into slices. Apple turnovers came last. She kept the pastry cold until she needed it, put the turnovers together while the muffins and coffee cake baked, then slid them into the ovens as the earlier trays came out. By the time Petra arrived, usually 30 or 40 minutes after Brynn, the kitchen already smelled like butter and hot sugar, and the first rack of donuts was cooling. Brynn would hear the front door, then her mother's voice greeting whoever was waiting outside, sometimes a regular who came early, sometimes no one, in which case Petra just said good morning to the street. Petra was 59. She still baked every day but had been doing less in recent years. She made the maple cream filling and the glaze for the donuts. She rolled the puff pastry sheets for the turnovers when Brynn was behind on time. She talked to long-time customers who came in expecting to see her behind the counter, knew their names and what they usually ordered, and sometimes stood at the register for 10 minutes with someone who only bought a single muffin. She made most of the decisions about the business, what to order from suppliers, what to charge, when to adjust the hours, whether to try something new or keep things the way they had always been. Merritt, Brynn's older sister, was 31. She had come back to Bellows Falls 2 years ago and taken over everything that happened on the other side of the kitchen door. The register, the phone, the pre-orders, the pickup schedule, the packaging, the social media pages, the corporate clients. She arrived after the baking had started and stayed through closing, which on most days was later than Brynn's last batch. Labels aligned, boxes stacked, the counter wiped between customers. She was good at talking to people in a way that neither Brynn nor Petra was. The bakery itself was not large. The kitchen had 2 ovens, a stand mixer, a long stainless steel work table, a rolling sheet pan rack, a small hand sink, and the 3-basin sink. The front had a glass display case, a register, a small counter for pickup orders, and a narrow counter beneath the window with 5 stools. There were no tables and no cafe menu. People came in, bought what they wanted, and left. It was a small bakery run by 3 people. They each did what they did. In early December, Enid called. She was Petra's younger sister and lived in Middlebury, about 2 hours north. Every year she invited the three of them to spend Christmas at her house. Every year they said no. This year Enid said again that if any of them wanted to come up, there was always room. Petra said Christmas week was the bakery's busiest. Merritt said she couldn't go either. Brynn told Enid she would call back after the holiday season. She said it the way she always said it, knowing she probably wouldn't. That year, Merritt made a significant change to how the bakery handled holiday orders. In previous seasons, customers placed orders by calling the bakery, stopping by in person, or having their names written in a binder that Merritt kept behind the counter. The binder worked, but it required Merritt to answer every call, confirm every detail, and read back every order. Mistakes happened when the bakery was busy and Merritt was taking a phone order while ringing up a walk-in at the same time. Merritt moved most of the pre-orders online. Customers could select the number of boxes of maple cream sandwich cookies they wanted, pay in advance, choose a pickup window, and receive a confirmation email. She also introduced corporate holiday gift boxes for local offices and businesses, a minimum order of 10 boxes with a small volume discount. In the first week, pre-order volume was higher than in any previous year at the same point. The phone rang less. Merritt had a cleaner list for labels and pickup scheduling. Petra was pleased when she looked at the holiday revenue numbers. In the kitchen, things looked different. The maple cream sandwich cookies were not complicated, but they took time. Each batch of cookies had to be mixed, portioned, baked, and cooled completely before the maple cream filling could be piped between them. If the cookies were still warm, the filling softened and the sandwich didn't hold together in the box. Cooling took longer than baking. Brynn could not make it go faster. As the pre-orders increased, a batch of maple cookies had to be moved ahead of the regular morning items. Packaging had to wait for cookies to cool, and the wait backed up everything behind it. Some afternoons, Brynn was still portioning filling when she should have been cleaning up. Closing time started stretching later. Her lower back ached most days now. It happened every holiday season, the longer hours, the extra batches, the standing. None of this was new. It was December. This was what December felt like, when the online system still had open pickup slots. Brynn told Petra that the kitchen was close to its production limit and they needed to stop taking pre-orders. Petra did not want to close orders too early in the season, but she agreed. Merritt turned off the online ordering. 2 days later, Brynn found 5 additional boxes on the production sheet that did not appear in Merritt's system. Petra had taken them over the phone from a regular customer. The following day there were 3 more. Mr. Pruitt, an elderly neighbor, came into the bakery that afternoon. He walked slowly to the counter, one hand on the glass case for balance, and asked Petra if she could make him 4 boxes like every year. He said 2 were for his daughter's family in Brattleboro, and 2 were for neighbors he exchanged gifts with every Christmas. He picked out 2 apple turnovers to take home and paid in cash with exact change from a small leather coin purse. Mr. Pruitt had been buying from this bakery since Petra's mother was the one behind the counter. Brynn's grandmother had opened the shop decades ago, when the building still had a different storefront and the ovens were smaller. After she died, Petra took over. Mr. Pruitt still came in and called Petra by her first name and asked after the family. He asked about Brynn too, though Brynn was 10 feet away in the kitchen and could hear every word through the open doorway. Petra accepted his order. She wrote it on a slip of paper and put it with the others on the shelf above the phone. By Tuesday morning, Brynn counted 12 boxes on the production sheet that existed outside Merritt's system. Brynn did not say anything about Mr. Pruitt's order specifically. There was nothing to say about Mr. Pruitt. He was an old man who bought 4 boxes of cookies every December. The problem was not Mr. Pruitt. The problem was that the next morning there were more orders on the shelf, and the morning after that there were more again, each in Petra's handwriting. Each from someone who had called or stopped by and asked personally. A woman from the church who always ordered 2 boxes. A former teacher who wanted 8. A family friend who said she had tried the online system but it was closed and could Petra please just put her down for 3. Petra said yes to all of them. By Thursday, there were 25. That Friday, a pickup slot ran late. Customers who had booked the 4 to 5 window were still waiting at 5:15. 2 of them stood at the counter. One sat on a stool by the window, checking her phone. Merritt told them the orders would be ready shortly, which was not exactly true. In the kitchen, 3 racks of cookies that should have been filled and boxed by mid-afternoon were still bare on the wire cooling shelves. Brynn could not fill them until they had cooled completely. She had learned this the hard way years ago. Warm cookies made the maple cream slide, and the customer opened the box to find the filling pooled at the bottom. So she waited. There was nothing else she could do about the laws of temperature. Her hands smelled like butter and sugar and the sanitizer she used to wipe down the stainless steel table between batches. Her lower back had started hurting around noon and had not stopped. The muscles between her shoulder blades felt knotted from hours of leaning over the work table. She had been standing since 5:40 in the morning. Petra was still in the kitchen, portioning maple cream into piping bags for the cookies that were still cooling. She looked at the clock above the door and then at Brynn. She asked if Brynn could stay and help finish. Brynn looked at the racks. She looked at the orders pinned to the board. She stayed. The 3 of them worked until nearly 10. The bakery was dark in front. Merritt had turned off the display case lights and locked the door after the last walk-in customer, but the kitchen stayed bright. Brynn piped maple cream onto half the cooled cookies, then pressed a second cookie onto each one and arranged the finished sandwiches in rows on the sheet pans. Petra worked beside her, packing the finished sandwiches into the wax paper-lined boxes, 6 per box, fitting them snugly so they would not shift during the drive home. Merritt moved between the kitchen and the packing table near the front, matching printed labels to order numbers, taping boxes shut, writing pickup names on the lids in marker, and stacking them on the shelf. When the last boxes were labeled, Merritt washed the piping bags and the sheet pans that had been piling up in the sink since mid-afternoon. Brynn wiped down the work table for the last time. The kitchen smelled like butter, baked sugar, and dish soap. Before she left that night, Brynn stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the front. Petra was untying her apron. Merritt was putting the last stack of boxes on the pickup shelf. Brynn told them both that this could not continue. If they kept accepting orders after she had calculated what the kitchen could handle, she would not be able to stay every night to finish them. She said it plainly. She did not raise her voice. Petra wiped her hands on her apron. She said she understood. Merritt said she understood too. A few days later, Brynn proposed a specific production cap, a maximum number of boxes the kitchen could produce per day, based on oven capacity, cooling time, and the hours she was willing to work. She also proposed hiring a seasonal kitchen helper for cleaning, portioning, and tasks that did not require baking skill. Petra did not want to bring a new person into the kitchen right before Christmas. It would cost money they had not budgeted for, and whoever they hired would need to be trained, and there was no time to train anyone. Merritt adjusted the online system instead. She lowered the maximum number of boxes per order, and divided the pickup windows into smaller time slots so that customers would not arrive in clusters. The front counter ran more smoothly after that. Brynn watched the total number of batches on the kitchen schedule continue to rise. Merritt's changes had made it easier for customers to pick up their orders. They had not reduced the number of orders. Eventually, Petra accepted the production cap Brynn had set. Brynn also cut a few low-selling holiday items from the board. A peppermint shortbread that sold 3 or 4 pieces a day. A cranberry scone that no one had asked about to focus the kitchen's output on the daily menu, and the maple cream sandwich cookies. For 3 days in a row, the bakery ran the way Brynn had planned it. She started at 5:40, ran the batches in order, filled and boxed cookies by mid-afternoon, cleaned the kitchen, and left by 4. Pickups were on time. Customers came during their window, picked up their boxes, and left. Merritt was not running back and forth between the counter and the kitchen. Petra made her fillings, helped with assembly when Brynn asked, talked to customers, and closed the register at the regular time. On those 3 days, Brynn walked home in the late afternoon light, and her back did not hurt more than it usually did. She ate dinner, sat in her room, and went to bed early enough to wake at 4 without feeling like she had not slept. On the 4th day, Brynn looked at the production sheet and saw a series of new orders she had not scheduled. She asked Merritt why the online ordering was open again. Merritt said she had broken the pickup windows into smaller blocks and limited the number of boxes per customer, so the counter would not get backed up the way it had before. Brynn said the number of customers standing at the counter was not the problem she was talking about. Merritt said they could not keep shutting down ordering every time the bakery started selling well. Brynn asked who was going to make the cookies that had just been added to the schedule. Merritt said Petra had approved reopening the slots. Brynn looked at her sister. Mom isn't the one staying at that table until midnight. Merritt set down the stack of labels she was holding. You act like every new order is something we're doing to you. Because I'm the one who has to make it. Merritt turned back to the boxes waiting to be closed. Brynn went back into the kitchen. Neither of them said anything else. Merritt had been the only one of the two sisters to leave Bellows Falls after high school. She had enrolled in a 2-year program in hospitality and restaurant management, then worked front-of-house positions and assistant management jobs in towns and small cities outside the area. She had thought she would build a career somewhere else, somewhere with more restaurants and more opportunity than a small village in southern Vermont where her mother ran a bakery. Coming back had not been part of that plan. 2 years later, she was still here. The more Merritt became involved in the bakery, the more she needed to show that her return had not been a retreat. The online ordering, the corporate gift boxes, the pickup system, these were things she had learned to do. They were working. Revenue was higher than any previous holiday season. These numbers were real. Petra also continued accepting orders from a few regular customers she had previously turned away. By the end of that day, production fell behind. Several customers arrived during the pickup window to find their boxes not yet assembled. The phone rang and went to voicemail twice while Merritt was in the back pulling labels, arranging cookies into boxes, folding lids, and washing equipment that had accumulated throughout the afternoon. One pickup had to be moved to late in the day. Brynn's back had not stopped hurting since she arrived that morning. Her hands ached in a way that felt deeper than the skin, in the joints and the muscles between her thumb and forefinger where she gripped the piping bag for hours. She could feel the day in her body the way she could feel every day now, each one leaving a little less room for the next. At the time they had agreed on, Brynn took off her apron and hung it on the hook by the door. She washed her hands at the small hand sink, dried them with a paper towel, and picked up her jacket from the shelf where she kept it. She did not stay. She walked home. The air outside was cold and dry and she could feel it on her face after the heat of the kitchen. The walk took less than 10 minutes. She did not look back at the building. Petra continued baking alone. Merritt stayed to finish the packing and handle the remaining customers. Brynn did not know what time they finished. She did not ask. That evening, she sat on her bed in the room she had slept in since she was a child. The house was dark and quiet. She could hear the furnace running, and outside, a car passing on the street. She sat with her hands in her lap and did nothing. Sometime after 9, the front door opened. She heard her mother's footsteps in the hallway, slow, heavy, the footsteps of someone who had been standing all day. Petra went to the bathroom. Water ran. Then her bedroom door closed. They did not speak to each other. Brynn lay in the dark and thought about a time a couple of years earlier, when Merritt had come home after losing her job. Her sister had arrived with 2 suitcases and a tight expression on her face. She sat at the kitchen table that first evening, tired and flat, drinking tea and not saying much. She didn't know where she was going to go next. She had been let go from an assistant manager position at a restaurant that was closing, and the job she had lined up after that had fallen through. Petra had not made it a big discussion. She just said that the bakery was small, but there was always a place for Merritt if she wanted to stay. Merritt stayed. After a few weeks, she stopped talking about looking for work elsewhere. She rented a small apartment near downtown and gradually took over everything that happened on the other side of the kitchen door. The counter, the phone, the customers, the orders. She was good at it. She brought things to the bakery that neither Brynn nor Petra would have thought to do. Brynn had never resented Merritt for coming back. She had been glad at first to have her sister nearby again. The next morning, Brynn got up and walked to the bakery at the same time she always did. No one mentioned the night before. The following weekend, a local business contacted Merritt about ordering 60 boxes of maple cream sandwich cookies as Christmas gifts for its employees and clients. It would be a single order, prepaid, with 1 pickup date. Merritt did not enter it into the system. She brought it to Petra. Petra looked at the total. She told Merritt to accept it. Brynn was not asked. She had come into the bakery that morning with her shoulders already tight and a stiffness in her hands that did not go away after she flexed them. She had been working at this pace for weeks. Her body had stopped recovering between shifts. She walked into the kitchen and saw 60 new boxes of maple cream sandwich cookies added to the production sheet. Pickup was marked 4 days out. Every baking window inside the cap she had set was already spoken for. She started preparing the scheduled batches while the number sat at the edge of her attention, like something she could not put down. When Petra arrived, Brynn asked where the order came from. Petra said Merritt had landed a good corporate client. Just one pickup, prepaid, and if the three of them pushed a little harder for a few days, they could get it done. Brynn said the production schedule had been full before the 60 boxes appeared. Petra said she would go back to working longer hours in the kitchen. Merritt could stay late for packing. They just needed to get through the next 4 days. Brynn said that was what they had said every time they went over the cap. Merritt heard them from the front and came through the doorway. She said this was not a few walk-in customers. She had spent weeks building the corporate side of the business, and a client this size could come back next year. Brynn asked why Merritt hadn't talked to her before accepting the order. Merritt said Petra was the owner and Petra had approved it. And I'm the one who has to make 720 cookies. Merritt said she would stay late too. Brynn looked at her sister. You can pack them. You can label them. You can sell them. You can't bake them for me. Petra told them both to stop. She said Brynn was tired and everyone was tired. They had gotten through worse Christmases than this one. We got through them because every time I said no, I stayed anyway, Brynn said. Petra was quiet for a moment. This is your job, Brynn. You can't walk away 4 days before a pickup this size just because you disagree with a decision I made. Brynn looked at her mother. If it's my job, why am I the only one who doesn't get a say in how much of it you sell? You're making this personal, Merritt said. If you walk out now, Mom has to do all the baking herself right before Christmas. Brynn looked at Petra. Petra did not tell Merritt to stop. She said, I need you to finish what we started. I finished everything I agreed to do, Brynn said. The 60 boxes weren't part of that. Petra looked at her. If you leave now, in the middle of the busiest week of the year, this isn't just you going home early. Brynn nodded. I know. She took off her apron. She folded it once and set it on the counter. She put the bakery key on the stainless steel table next to the apron. She clocked out. We're going to lose customers, Merritt called after her. Brynn stopped at the door but did not turn around. Then stop selling work you don't have anyone to do. She stepped outside and walked home. Petra went back to the mixer and started recalculating production with Merritt. Merritt moved some pickups, shut down the online ordering entirely and called several customers to ask if they could pick up later than scheduled. She shifted all of her own time to labels, boxes, filling and cleaning, so that Petra would not have to leave the work table. By early afternoon, Petra had already dropped apple turnovers from the next day's schedule and cut the coffee cake. But the production sheet still did not have room for the 60 new boxes. Merritt suggested splitting the corporate order into 2 pickups. The client needed all the gifts on the same day. Petra tried the numbers one more time. In the end, Merritt called the client and processed the refund. In the days that followed, several other late pre-orders had to be refunded as well. Merritt made the calls. She sat at the counter with the order list and called each customer and explained that due to a staffing change, the bakery could not fulfill their order. Some customers were understanding. One woman asked what kind of bakery takes orders and then cancels them a week before Christmas. Petra stopped accepting new orders and sharply reduced what was available for walk-in customers. Blueberry muffins were cut to 1 batch in the morning. Buttermilk cake donuts stayed on the menu, but only in reduced quantities, and they often sold out before noon. Maple cream sandwich cookies were produced only in the quantities Petra could bake on her own. The bakery stayed open. The case behind the counter was visibly thinner than it had been the week before. Regulars who came in mid-morning found items already gone. In the remaining days before Christmas, Petra left the house before dawn and came home after dark. Brynn heard her leave in the morning and heard her come back at night. She did not go to the bakery. The first full morning after she quit, Brynn woke at the time her body had been waking for years. It was still dark. She lay still and heard Petra in the kitchen below, the faucet, a cabinet door, the particular sound of the travel mug set down on the counter. The front door opened and closed, then the storm door. Brynn lay still. She stayed in bed. Her hands were on top of the blanket with nothing to do. She looked at them in the dim light. They were dry and rough, the knuckles reddened, and there was a small crack along the side of her right thumb that she had been ignoring for weeks. In the bakery, her hands were always in flour, or butter, or sanitizer, or hot water. They were always doing something. She had never spent time looking at them. The crack on her thumb was deep enough that it stung when she bent it. She had not noticed that before. She lay in bed until the room grew lighter. Then she got up and went downstairs. Petra's mug was in the dish rack, washed and turned upside down. A single plate also washed. The kitchen was clean and quiet. Light came through the window above the sink, falling across the counter and the table in a way Brynn did not usually see, because she was usually at the bakery by now. She had not been home at this hour on a weekday in years. She made coffee with the drip machine and sat at the table. She drank it slowly. There was no reason to drink it fast. It was close to noon before she went outside. She walked through downtown, bought a few small things she didn't need, and kept going without anywhere in particular to be. Before long, she found herself on the same streets around the house and the bakery that she had been walking for years. She came home and sat at the kitchen table. Her hands lay flat on the surface. They felt wrong, idle, and too light, as if they were missing something they were supposed to be holding. She turned them over and looked at the palms. There were calluses at the base of her fingers from years of gripping sheep pans and rolling pins. She closed her hands and opened them again. They did not know what to do with an afternoon. Petra came home after dark. Brynn heard the door from upstairs. Neither of them went to find the other. The next day was much the same. She left the house, walked a loop, and came back. Except for occasional supply runs when Petra let her take the car, she had barely been farther than a few blocks from the bakery for most of her adult life. The bakery, the house, the walk between them, and the supply vendor 20 minutes away. That was the full size of her life. Around noon that day, Brynn opened her banking app. The balance was $13,520. For years, she had given Petra a fixed amount each month for household expenses and paid for her own things out of what remained. She had never paid market rent. She had never had a large expense that required her to use what she had saved. She looked at the number for a while. Then she started looking at used cars listed in the area. She went to see a Toyota Corolla at a used car dealer near Bellows Falls. It was more than 10 years old. The mileage was high and there were several scratches on the body. Brynn had gotten her driver's license years ago. She had driven Petra's car around town, but she had never owned a car herself. At the dealership, she test drove the Corolla on the roads nearby. She took longer to decide than she had expected. In the end, she called for insurance, completed the paperwork, and used more than half of her savings to pay for the car, the tax, and the fees. She drove the Corolla home with a temporary plate. Petra saw the car parked out front when she came home that evening. She asked Brynn if she had bought it. Brynn said yes. Petra looked at the car for another moment and then went inside. From that day on, Brynn drove a loop around Bellows Falls every afternoon. At first she only went through downtown and back, then she started going farther, past the streets that fell within the walk she had always taken between the house and the bakery. After a few days, the car became familiar, the distance from her seat to the edges of it, the way it moved through turns, and she stopped turning around as soon as she reached the edge of town. During that time, the bakery was still reducing orders and cutting walk-in items so that Petra and Merritt could finish what remained before Christmas. 3 days before Christmas, Brynn saw Enid's name in her recent calls. She remembered the invitation from early December. She called. She asked if the Christmas invitation still stood. Enid said of course it did. After the call, Brynn took out a duffel bag and started packing clothes for a few days. She sent a message to the family group chat saying she would be spending Christmas at Enid's house this year. Petra and Merritt both read the message. Neither of them replied. Brynn put her phone down. She put on her jacket and went downstairs. That afternoon, she drove her usual loop through Bellows Falls. This time, when she reached the stretch of road where she usually turned around to head home, she drove a little farther before turning back. On Christmas Eve morning, around 8:30, Brynn put her phone on the dashboard mount, entered Enid's address in the Maps app, and looked at the estimated drive, just over 2 hours. She adjusted the mirror, checked the fuel gauge, and pulled out of the driveway. She went through the streets of Bellows Falls that she had been practicing on for the past several days, past the hardware store which was closed for the holiday, past the intersection where the light was red this time and she waited for it, past the bakery, which she could see from the road. The lights were on inside, and there was a car parked at the curb that she did not recognize. She kept driving. When the streets she knew were behind her, the road opened into longer stretches between towns. Fields on both sides, some with snow in the furrows, some bare. Brynn held the steering wheel with both hands, tighter than necessary. She drove slower than the cars that passed her. A pickup truck went around her on a straightaway and she watched it pull ahead until it was small. The route was mostly two-lane roads through small towns and stretches of farmland and forest. She watched the mile markers and the blue line on her phone and the road ahead of her, which kept going. This was the farthest she had ever driven alone. A little over an hour into the drive, she pulled into a gas station parking lot on the side of the road. She didn't need gas. She turned off the engine and sat in the car. The parking lot was empty except for one other vehicle at the pumps. She looked at the map on her phone. It still showed more than an hour to Middlebury. She sat for a few minutes. Then she started the car and pulled back onto the road. The drive after the stop was easier. Her hands loosened on the wheel. She stopped riding the brake through every gentle curve. On the straighter stretches, she let the car move a little closer to the posted speed limit. Towns appeared and passed. A general store with a single gas pump out front. A closed school whose marquee still read Happy Holidays. Houses set back from the road with split cordwood stacked along the side. While Brynn drove toward Middlebury, the bakery in Bellows Falls was still handling its Christmas Eve pickups. It was nearly 11 when Brynn turned the Corolla into a driveway on a residential street in Middlebury and parked behind her aunt's car. She turned off the engine. Her hands were still on the wheel. She let go of it, picked up her phone, and looked at the screen. The Maps app said she had arrived. She got out and took the duffel bag from the back seat. Enid opened the front door before Brynn knocked a second time. She was wearing a heavy cardigan and slippers, and she looked the way she always looked. Her hair pulled back, her face lined, her eyes sharp and glad. She hugged her niece and held on for a long moment, one hand on the back of Brynna's head. Then she took one end of the duffel bag from her hand and pulled her inside. The house was warm and smelled like something cooking. Enid lived alone. She had never married. The house had more space than one person needed. A guest room that was always made up with clean sheets, a dining table with 4 chairs, a living room with 2 armchairs and a shelf of books and a window that looked onto the street. The house was quiet, but not empty. Everything in it seemed settled and lived in. Enid's Christmas invitation, which she extended every year and which every year was declined, had never been just a polite gesture. She had always meant it. In the kitchen, a pot of vegetable barley soup was still warm on the stove. Enid ladled a full bowl, set a plate of bread and a dish of butter on the table, and sat down across from Brynn. She did not ask about the bakery. She did not ask why Brynn had come this year and not the years before. She did not ask about Petra or Merritt. She asked how the drive was. Brynn said it took longer than she expected. Enid smiled. That usually happens the first time. Brynn ate the soup. It was simple and hot. Halfway through the bowl, she realized she had not eaten anything that morning. Enid refilled her bowl without asking. Brynn ate the second bowl too, and 2 pieces of bread with butter, and drank a glass of water. After lunch, Enid showed her the guest room upstairs. The bed was made with a blue quilt. There was a lamp on the nightstand and a towel folded on the chair. Brynn set her bag down and stood in the room for a moment. It was the first room she had slept in that was not her own bedroom in a long time. On Christmas morning, Brynn woke when the guest room was already fully bright. The blue quilt was warm and heavy over her. For a few seconds, she thought she had overslept. Every Christmas before this one, the customer orders had been finished on Christmas Eve, but after spending the entire day making cookies for customers, Brynn had still gotten up around 5 on Christmas morning to make cinnamon rolls for the family. She would mix the dough and let it rise, then roll it out, spread the butter and cinnamon sugar, shape the rolls, and let them rise again while the kitchen warmed up. By the time the rolls were nearly done, Petra would come downstairs and start preparing the roast chicken for Christmas dinner. Merritt would set the table and do the last things around the house. The cinnamon rolls were always first. Brynn always made them. No one had ever asked her to. She had started doing it one year, and then it was what she did every year. She lay in the guest room bed and looked at the ceiling. The light came from a different direction than she was used to. The house was quiet. No one was getting ready to leave for a bakery. No one was running water or opening cabinets or setting a mug on the counter. She lay there for a long time. She did not feel the need to get up. When she finally went downstairs, Enid was in the kitchen. She had made scrambled eggs, home fries, and buttered toast. A pot of drip coffee was still hot on the counter. 2 places were set at the table. They ate breakfast together. Enid talked about a neighbor's dog that had been digging under her fence and getting into the garden. She said she had tried putting chicken wire along the bottom, but the dog found a new spot every time. Brynn listened and drank her coffee. The eggs were good. The toast had enough butter. It was the first Christmas morning in years that Brynn had not been the one to cook breakfast. After they cleared the dishes, Brynn asked Enid if she had flour, butter, and yeast. Enid said she did. She showed Brynn the flour and yeast in the pantry and the butter in the refrigerator, then pointed out the mixing bowls in the lower cabinet, the knives beside the sink, and the measuring cups in a jar by the stove. Brynn measured and mixed the dough by hand. She covered the bowl and left the dough to rise in the warm kitchen. When the dough had risen, she rolled it out on the counter with a drinking glass because Enid didn't own a rolling pin. She spread soft butter across the surface, sprinkled cinnamon and sugar, rolled it tight and cut 2 rounds with the knife. She set the 2 rolls in a small baking dish, covered them again, and left them to rise. She had made 2. One for Enid and one for herself. While she waited, Brynn turned on the oven to preheat and cleaned up, washing the bowl and the knife and the drinking glass, drying them and putting them back where they belonged. Enid sat at the table and otherwise left her to it. When the rolls had risen, Brynn slid the dish into the oven and started the timer. She told Enid she wanted to take a short walk while they baked. "I'll take them out when the timer goes off," Enid said. Brynn crossed to the front door and took her jacket from the rack beside it. She put it on and slipped her hands into the pockets. Her fingers touched the Corolla key. Brynn stopped for a moment. She was not yet used to having a car key of her own in her pocket. She zipped the jacket higher and stepped out onto the quiet road in Middlebury,